Welcome back to the Formula One Grid Talk podcast. We are powered by the F1 Chronicle. Visit f1chronicle.com for news, reviews and opinions on all things F1. Formula One may have stopped, but our fans and listeners are still looking for content to listen to. Today we are going to speak to two journalists who were on the ground in Australia when the first GP of the season was meant to happen and get their rundown on events there. Hosting today will be me, George Howson, and joining me today are Inside Line podcast host, Kunal Shah.
Hey guys, good to be back on the show and thanks for having me, George.
Always welcome, Kunal, always welcome. Motorsport journalist and broadcaster, Chris Medland.
Good afternoon, everyone, and hi to your son in the background there.
Rex has made many appearances on this show. None of them were meant to happen, but, there we go. Working from home, this is what we've got to do. And motorsport journalist, Philip Horton.
Hello, everyone, and remember to stay home.
Definitely getting the message out. So Chris and Philip were both in Australia when the first race this season was meant to happen, and it's been fascinating going through all your tweets and the absolute debacle of what was going on. Like, it got to a few hours before FP1 before it was officially cancelled. I mean, I'm going to open the floor to you guys. I mean, take it away. I just want to hear what happened, because obviously most of us were asleep when this was going on, but it was all happening, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we should have all been asleep when it was going on, shouldn't we, Phil? We were awake strange hours.
No, I did fall asleep very briefly. I didn't mean to, but I did. I know you didn't.
Yeah, it went straight through the night. I mean, it was about 11 o'clock or 10:30, I think, that we got confirmation from McLaren that they were pulling out on the Thursday night.
Yeah.
And I think everyone involved knew what that meant and that the race wasn't going to go ahead. But for some reason, Formula One wasn't prepared with its own reaction and suddenly thought, we've got to deal with this problem. And we kept getting various stories from different teams saying, yeah, we're going to pull out, or we've just had a team meeting and it's going to be called off. Then I think Sky reported initially that it was going ahead because they'd spoken to a team member that had said, well, we haven't pulled out, we'll just wait for official confirmation. BBC got word from other team bosses that, no, we're sending our drivers home, like, we're not going to race. And realistically, everyone knew what was coming, and just F1 wasn't organised enough. So we were awake all night trying to get hold of official confirmation that, as you say, George, came really, really late. And as much as I think Chase Carey said 12 hours was quick to turn it round, to get everyone together, talk about it and call the race off, it should have been 12 minutes. It should have been done instantly, because they should have known exactly that this was the worst case scenario that could happen and have been ready for it.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't going to get better, was it? I mean, obviously, the McLaren mechanic, they had the coronavirus. A few Haas mechanics were tested for it. They suspected for it. I don't think they ended up having it. But yeah, Philip, I mean, it was unbelievable that it got to that. It was reminiscent of Indianapolis 2005 in some ways, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like Chris said, we were all together on Thursday night when it broke. We got the message from McLaren saying we're withdrawing because one of our team members is tested positive for coronavirus. So we knew then the likelihood was this race isn't going to happen. We're going home. But then, like Chris said, we stayed up pretty much all night. I only fell asleep because I was so tired that I was just sat on my bed and I fell asleep, woke up about 3 a.m. thinking, has this been cancelled yet? Thinking it was going to have been cancelled, and it wasn't. So we went to the circuit the next day very early, about 6 or 7 in the morning, just to see what was going to happen. And it was just waiting for the inevitable. And then it came, I think it was about 10 a.m. I think it was 10:15 when it was finally cancelled. And that was something that ultimately happened at 2 or 3 in the morning. It just took that long for all the official channels to happen, for it to be properly communicated. And I think for them to work out who was actually going to be financially responsible, who pulled the pin first, so to speak, and then who was going to be further down the line, who gets the blame, in effect.
Yeah, it was very much big unknowns, wasn't it? I mean, it's unbelievable that it got to that in the end. I mean, what was the reaction on the ground with the fans? Like, I mean, I guess some people would have been disappointed there wasn't an event, but the overriding feeling should have been it had to happen. They had to cancel it because of the danger to the fans, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, Phil, I was one who didn't go to the circuit on the Friday morning because from every sort of person I spoke to from different teams, it wasn't going to go ahead. We were going to cancel the race, and it was on safety grounds. It was, do not spread this virus. And suddenly we were getting everyone to flock to the track. But as Phil said, there was no sort of certainty. So some people had needed to go to try and sort of find out on the ground. I'd found through the night that so many fans had been trying to kind of use our Twitter feeds to find out what was going on because nothing official was coming out. got loads of calls from different Melbourne radio stations first thing in the morning. I think it's just before 6, they all went live with their breakfast shows, and suddenly phone wouldn't stop ringing because they're going, oh, we've just woken up and seeing that you're saying this race is going to be off. Should our listeners be going to the circuit or not? And as Phil then saw, like, people were travelling to the track and were waiting outside to try and get in.
Yeah, it's quite an unbelievable scenario, isn't it? I mean, Kunal, I'm sure you've got a lot of questions as well for these guys. I mean, it's just such an odd event for a Grand Prix to be cancelled, let alone so soon before it actually is meant to begin.
Yeah, I mean, it was like a strategy blunder, to be honest. And we sort of called it like, Liberty Media was undercut by the coronavirus in Australia. And that's what eventually happened. Then the thoughts always go back to wondering that if there was Bernie Ecclestone, would he have acted differently? Would he have done differently? Because beyond the point, in the whole mess or the three stools between which the responsibilities fell, it seemed like one was waiting for the other to make cancellation announcement, so that, it was the financial implications, as Philip and Chris just mentioned, would sort of fall within the right guidelines, and the correct insurance clauses and the correct force majeure clauses would be evoked and so on. But, I'm glad that, Formula One's acted much earlier on with the following races all the way till the end of May.
Yeah, all the races up until Azerbaijan, which was meant to take place in June, have been either cancelled or postponed. So
true, yeah, first week of June, yes.
Yeah, so maybe Canada or France will be the first one of the season, but at this rate, it's looking doubtful, I'll be honest. I mean, that was a good question that Kunal raised, though, Philip. I mean, if Bernie Ecclestone was still in charge of the sport, do you think that race would have gone ahead?
I discussed this with someone on the Friday afternoon after it was cancelled, and we both reckon that the news of the McLaren person testing positive would have been buried for as long as possible. And they would have persevered as much until it was no longer possible. I don't know, you said about like waiting for the last person to cancel. My gut, and from what I could work out on the morning, was that there was a lot of confused messages in that. I think it was 7 a.m. when someone from the Victorian government appeared on TV, a local TV, and said this race is going ahead, and then by 9 o'clock it wasn't. So I think they were waiting for the Victorian government to effectively say you cannot have mass gatherings or this shouldn't go ahead. With Bernie, who knows? Ultimately, he's not in charge. It's interesting to think what might have happened. I reckon we might have got a practice day in, and it probably would have looked pretty embarrassing if we'd have had 4 or 5 cars out on track for one practice session and then gone home. But who knows?
Yeah, I'm with Phil a bit that the whole way Bernie probably would have acted is there might have been more pressure on the teams originally that, keep this between the sport. Don't put out a statement that says you're not going to race. Talk to us first. And Bernie would have been fighting that fire behind the scenes about pulling out, because I think when McLaren pulled out, F1 weren't aware that was coming. It was pretty much just dropped on their door that, right, we're not racing, and publicly then said. And it was all putting pressure on them because they felt it was the wrong thing to do. But Bernie did act differently the way he used to work things. So I'm with Phil. I mean, we don't know how he would have done it because he's not in charge anymore. I find it pretty funny, some of the stories coming out now where he says, I just cancelled the season on safety grounds. And there's absolutely no way he'd do that, because race promoters are the biggest income the sport's got.
Yeah,
keep race promoters happy. So I think that'd be the last thing he'd do. I think he's far less likely to do it before Liberty are. But these are businesses; they need these events to survive. So, yeah, I don't buy that for a second. Yeah, it would have been certainly a different approach. But it's one of those where I interviewed one of the chief execs at Baku just after they cancelled their race, and they said they had to do it because of the lead time of building a temporary circuit. It's very expensive, so you don't want to be spending money on an event that might not happen. Whereas a permanent circuit can obviously wait a bit longer. But he said for Melbourne, that's an absolute disaster that it gets that late. You spent all that money. You've got everything in place. You're ready to go. You're basically starting the event and then you're stopping it. And it's just all you've done is waste all the money. So I did get why there was a reluctance from the race promoter and race organizer to cancel it. They needed, as Phil said, their government to say, no, you can't do this, so that then they were probably covered from an insurance point of view, or they needed F1 to call it off. And that's why you had all these different scenarios where people were waiting and not making the call.
Yeah, absolutely bizarre scenario, but everything you're saying makes sense. I mean, it calls down to insurance as well, because obviously they spend so much money on the event. If it doesn't happen, they need to be compensated for it. Just incredible scenario we found ourselves in. But one thing I want to highlight as well, Kunal, is one of the stories that you covered in your most recent podcast. I listened to it last night about Helmut Marko wanting Max Verstappen, if he's going to get the virus, to get it now, just to get it out of the way, which is the most... We were talking about Bernie Ecclestone being harsh, but Helmut Marko's on another level.
He wants the worst and the best for Max Verstappen in 2020. He wants him to have the virus and he wants him to have the world championship. So, yeah, crazy times.
It's unbelievable. Only he would say something like this. But yeah, it's a mental scenario to ourselves. And I mean, what are your guys' kind of gut feelings of what's going to happen with this season now? Because I've heard that the season needs 8 races, I think, for it to count as a full world championship, full in inverted commas. But at this rate, Phil, it looks like we're going to struggle to even get that.
Yeah, I mean, I had this discussion with someone yesterday, and we both think that, I mean, Canada's not going to happen. I can't see any way that we can be racing in Canada in, 2.5 months' time. That's not going to happen. France will be the next one. That's more realistic because it's something that if you really wanted to push, you could probably do behind closed doors. You could get everyone into the airport nearby. I still don't think that's going to happen. I think at best we're looking at Silverstone in mid-July, but I think that's a best case scenario as a first race. I think if anything happens, it's going to be the national series, touring cars, superbikes, GT races that are probably going to start up first because you can keep that. Maybe IndyCar, you can keep that nationally, whereas F1 is so international that you need so many restrictions to be lifted, so many things to slot it into place like they did before. And I can't see how that's going to happen in the next 3, 4, maybe even 5 months. So I think Silverstone at best. I think my gut is more September. And then do we have enough races, enough places we can go in that time frame to make a world championship, which we've all talked about is 8 races. I don't believe anyone's actually found a document that says it is 8 races. We've tried, we can't find it. I know Formula 2, which is different, is 10 events you need. So Lord knows how that's going to work because they're not getting 10 events this year. But with Formula 1, we all think it's 8. I think 8 is doable. But I think last week when they said 15 to 18, unless you're doing double headers, there's no way we're getting 15 to 18 races this year.
Yeah, as Phil says, that it's just kind of widely accepted that it's 8 races, and you did some digging, didn't you, in the International Sporting Code and stuff, and there's nothing that officially says it, but you just got to look back, because the FIA designate World Championship status. We think it's up to the FIA what will count as a World Championship or not, and they'll make a decision on if there's going to be enough races. But as Phil says as well, if we can start after the summer break, as it would have been, so with Spa, that's 9 races in 14 weeks that we've got there. So that would be enough if that threshold exists. Then obviously it sounds like there's races that are willing to move around to slot in. So I think that's where we've got to look at as a last target for it being comfortably a world championship. Anything beyond that's going to get tricky. I'm also in total agreement. Don't see Canada happening. Would love it to, but the international side, I think going outside of Europe. So when everyone's flying stuff, that's trickier than if everything's going by road, just in terms of the logistics side of things and setting up that circuit as well. So I think the French is that's still 3 months away. French Grand Prix would be 3 months today, I think. So they were talking about, I did an interview with Eric Boulier, and he was saying they're talking about going back to school at the start of May, I believe, the 4th of May that they've targeted as getting all their kids back to school in France. And that hasn't changed yet as their target date. So if things progress and in 3 or 4 weeks, that looks like a realistic date to be sending people back to school, then I do think it would be realistic to think 7 or 8 weeks after that, you might be able to host an event at Paul Ricard. Again, it might be behind closed doors, but that's one where he said they can make the call as late as the 23rd of June. They can make their money back and refund everyone and still not lose money if it's called off that late. But what they will need to know is how many tickets they've sold, which is going to be a low number, and how many grandstands they need. That's their one little bit of lead time they have to worry about. So I think that's one that we're going to see as the date that doesn't change for a long, long time that everyone's targeting. I don't think they'll be calling that one off months in advance like we have other races.
Yeah. If I could just add, because I thought of one more thing, is that you're right about Paul Ricard can leave it late. But I also think it's important to stress, I think when we do get going again, if and when we do get going again, it will be a strip down, strip back. We might not get the big motorhomes. It might only be 2-day weekends. It might not be many broadcasters go. Same with media. It might be let's just stick to the absolute bare essentials that you need to get a race going, i.e. teams, drivers, cars, just to get the show on the road. It's not going to be what we've been used to in recent years. Is going to be, I think, to start with a small operation just to make sure that you can put something in front of eyeballs on the screen, basically.
Yeah, it's possible. It's definitely possible. But I think Kunal, it's a very ambitious target. I mean, I don't know what they're saying over in Norway at the moment and other parts of Europe, but in the UK, they're generally expecting the peak of the so-called curve to be around sort of June time, which obviously that's the peak, and then it'll start to go down. But there'll still be a lot of people having cases. So I think having any races in Europe in the summer is going to be very ambitious.
Yeah, I think also, if France is the first Grand Prix, it's going to be a good turnaround from their fortunes from last year, which they delivered a really boring race, and they might just suddenly be like the opening round of 2020. But, crazy times. Hopefully they find, all the solutions of 2-day Grand Prix weekends and triple headers. And we even, in fact, asked the question that could Formula One just get a little greedy and put a quadruple header somewhere in Europe, just saying, okay, that's it, go racing. We need to get as many races to happen because, in all honesty, that's how the sport makes money. That's how the teams make money. And for 2021 to happen, we need to have some sort of racing and revenues coming in from 2020 as well.
Yeah, we need some sort of revenue. That's the big thing as well. Like, I mean, how are you guys thinking that this is going to impact a lot of the races in terms of revenue? I mean, obviously they're covered in terms of insurance, but it's still a lot of money they're going to be losing out on with the sponsors, with the drivers, with the fans, and everything. It could potentially put some races in doubt going forward.
Oh yeah, definitely. Not just races, but teams as well. I mean, it's the whole way you've got to look at any business that's struggling right now in terms of, if they're not able to do their core business, then people don't have endless pockets that are just going to keep running until we start up again. There's so limited income now because of the fact that people can't go racing, that the teams are having to downscale. It's why we've got the 3-week break and the mandatory shutdown now, is because it means that they're able to just lower their overheads by quite a chunk, which they knew they were going to have to do at some stage, but it just means right now that money's not going out while no money's coming in. Same thing with pushing the regs back for 21, because again, if they were spending money on that money just isn't coming in now. So it all feeds itself, and without the races being hosted to give the teams the money, but then without those teams being on site racing to get fans buying tickets to come to the event, it's all interlinked so tightly that any part of it could fall. And I think for the races that probably get cancelled early enough, something like a Baku, or I'm trying to think what else we've already had off. Vietnam probably lost a wage of money, but even China, when it was called off, by not going so far down the road with those events and spending the money, then they're a much more stable outfit to be sort of comfortable to try and come back later on. Whereas something like Australia, that's going to have taken a big hit where it's spent a lot of money and not had the return.
Do you go along with that, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in an unknown situation where I don't think there's any team, circuit, establishment that can consider itself completely safe, because, we're looking at the manufacturers. We don't know how this might affect the automotive industry. So you've got, Mercedes, Ferrari, Renault, Honda, the 4 manufacturers in Formula One. Do they all stay in Formula One in 2021 if we've had this period of downturn? If France is in such a situation where, the French state, the French economy has big problems, Renault is partly state-owned, do they say, well, F1 is expense, we can do without and pull the plug? These are all, we just don't know. That's on a wider scale. Then I think, as Chris mentioned, with the circuits, it will affect different circuits differently, in that there's some circuits that almost use Formula One as a loss leader anyway. So them not having Formula One might not actually affect them that much. And there's others that will be more affected because it's their showpiece and they do make a profit from it. So I think it's going to be a case-by-case situation, and it will affect everyone differently. To what extent, I think, depends on how long this goes on for, because teams at the moment they'll be struggling, but they should be fine because the TV money, the income, the sponsorship is all done in kind of delayed payments. So they're still getting, I think it might even be the last of the 2018 ones or the start of the 2019 ones. But at this rate, it will be maybe early 2021 where they're not getting the money now, is when they might start thinking, how much do we plan for looking 12 months down the line, and thinking that's when we're going to be struggling, because no one knows what to do, really.
And hopefully by then, I mean, it's bad, but hopefully by then potentially you could have the cost-cutting measures coming in. I think they've been pushed back to 2022, as have all the 2021. Oh, sorry for the audio, if you can hear that. You can guess who that is. Work it at home. But yeah, if they've been pushed back to 2022, which I believe they will have done, the cost-cutting measures, I mean, it kind of could be necessary for a lot of teams, Kunal, just to stay afloat.
Yeah, I mean, it's anyway a very expensive sport. We know how the more the money, the faster you go, and all these famous quotes from the world of motorsport and Formula One. And I'm actually glad that, people are looking forward and they're already making all these amendments to make sure that the 2022 and, all of this, will sort of hopefully stabilize the ecosystem of Formula One.
I might have missed a bit of that, Kunal, because
Yeah.
froze on mine. But I was going to say, I think that the financial regs and restrictions are going to stay in place for 21. I think they're still going to have the budget cap from next year to try and reduce that pressure. But by pushing back the car itself and the technical regs to 22, that means they're spending less now. I think there was a technical working group that was going to be at the end of last week that was going to say you can't do any development on your 2022 car until 2021. So that people aren't spending that money during this sort of spell, just to try and take that pressure off. So it's because part of what I heard your answer, Kunal, was of the way, if you spend money, you go quicker, and teams will just keep doing that. Like, they can't help themselves. They know there's an advantage to be had. If they can find the money, they'll spend it, and that's just going to push each other into trouble. So by writing it into regulation, you start to take that pressure off, and that's the only way we can go about it.
True.
So yeah, hopefully if the financial regulations do stay in place, then that would help them out. But we'll have to see what goes on with that. A good story. I mean, it's all been very doom and gloom, this podcast so far, understandably. But a good thing to come out of all of this, I believe the 7 Formula One teams that are based in the UK have turned a lot of their efforts to making respirators for the people who have coronavirus, which is a brilliant story. And I think as well, Ferrari have made a large donation in Italy towards the people who are suffering, which is particularly bad there as well. So there are some good stories out there, Philip, aren't there? I mean, it's bad times for Formula One, but at the same time, it's bringing people together. It's bringing these companies together to help out people.
Yeah, I think in Ferrari's case, they were kind of the first to get going with it because Italy was affected badly initially. I think Exor, which is the parent company or whatever it is on the stock exchange, has donated 10 million euros to the Italian government, along with I think it's 150 ventilators. Pirelli's made a donation as well and is helping out. Then the 7 UK-based teams. I don't know the exact ins and outs, whether Chris knows more than me. I know they're making or helping with the design of ventilators. I don't know which team's doing what, but I think that my understanding is they're collaborating their technical expertise, because obviously some teams have advanced engineering arms that have already helped out with non-F1 projects anyway, to do what they can in, I think wasn't it reverse engineering the ventilator, so it's working out, the initial production of them. Maybe you know more, Chris. I don't know.
It was that, there was kind of like 3 areas they're working on. Sorry if I drop out, it's telling me it's my internet now. Everybody obviously working from home is doing the same thing at the moment. But it was that they're looking to how to reverse engineer existing ventilators that have been approved, so that way they can then find a way of producing those on their own production lines or on other production lines more quickly. Because some people said, well, surely they just get told how they were made, but you can't. It's easier to adapt sort of a device to your production line than adapt the whole production line to a single device. The second one was to, I think, look at how they can help other people produce more devices. And the third one was to actually come up with new concepts. So they're kind of doing all 3. But again, I'm like Phil, they haven't released the details on which team's doing what. And obviously different teams have different capabilities and different arms. So that bit's a little bit unclear. But I think it's kind of understandable why, because they don't want any team. We were getting told by one of our colleagues that realistically the teams don't want to look like they're one-upping each other or trying to get a PR win out of it. They're just letting Formula One kind of give a blanket statement and blanket information out to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's great, that we're putting all the engineering might to use to try and help fight the virus outbreak. But before I go, I have one thing I wanted to discuss with 3 gentlemen. This is bringing in Jacques Villeneuve and his famous comments in. And he asked a comment which was saying, I don't know if the Formula One drivers are being paid. And we are talking of all these corporations and how they have various sources of revenue. But for the drivers, it's, when they go racing, they end up getting paid. What do you guys think?
I think they're on salaries that are annual and they're getting paid just fine. And some of them are finding other ways. They've got sponsors, then you can still see sponsor stuff coming out. I think there was a Jack and Jones thing with Kevin Magnussen the other day. Someone like Lando Norris is making a lot of money off his Twitch channel. There's different outlets that they're finding. And for some drivers, they won't be on huge salaries from their team, but they will be from sponsors. So they've got different income streams. So I think they're probably set up okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, in terms of people we should be worried about at the moment, I'm putting Formula One drivers pretty low down the list. I think they'll be fine.
I think they've got a few quid, haven't they? I think they'll be all right. I don't think they'll be getting many win race bonuses or fastest lap bonuses right now, unfortunately, unless they're counting the virtual GP, which
Well,
has been a big success.
doesn't matter for 7 of the teams anyway. So
yeah. True that.
That's
True
what
that.
BOP.
Yeah, but I'm going to take your leave, guys. It was lovely to be on this podcast with y'all, and hopefully we speak again sooner. And thanks especially to George for having me again. Have a good Sunday, guys.
Always welcome, Kunal. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
See you. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Thanks.
I want to get your take on the virtual GP as well, actually, lads. I mean, that's another thing which I think it's been organised really quickly. I mean, they had the not the Australian Grand Prix for the Australian Grand Prix, but by Bahrain, when Bahrain was meant to happen, they had a full blown, not the Bahrain Grand Prix, and a virtual GP, seeing people from all walks of life, golfers, ex-drivers, other sports people. I think it was amazing to see. What do you guys think of it?
Well, your son doesn't sound like he's a fan of the golfers getting involved, but
He's just having a go at me. That's it.
But no, I think it's been quite cool just to try something. I mean, a few of us were discussing it the weekend that it's not the same, obviously, as real racing, but when there's nothing going on, you have got to try and do something. There's been better uptake in different sports, but then they've got different licensing issues. I think Phil was watching the IndyCar race last night, so I'll let him talk a bit more about that one. But they don't have the same restrictions that F1 has in terms of an official licensed game that they would have to use if they did it. And the problem is that game's great at being wide-reaching to everyone, but for the drivers, it's so unrealistic compared to some of the other platforms out there that they're not all willing to get involved. So hopefully the longer this goes on, we'll get a bit more of that. I think it's been good that so many have been set up and so quickly. I do think that they need to be spread out a little bit more or try and find their own little niche a little more, because I don't think it's going to continue that everyone's going to spend their whole Sunday, for example, watching 6 hours wall-to-wall different sim racing. That's just not going to happen. Very few people would do that if it was actual real racing. They would want to, but if you had an F1 race, then an IndyCar race, then a NASCAR race, all back-to-back, and that was every weekend. I know we sometimes have it with Monaco and Indy and Daytona and stuff like that, but if you had that every weekend, people would just have to pick and choose their favorite ones and be like, right, priority is that race, I'll catch up on the others later. So I don't think it can continue quite with this much thrown at us at one time. But yeah, I've admired the initiative to try and get something going.
yeah, I agree with what Chris said. I'm probably a bit of a heretic in that I've not missed racing, even real racing at all yet, just because of how much has gone on. I'm not missing it at all. I'm not a big fan of esports. It's not something that's ever grabbed me, but I did try with both of the things that were on last weekend and thought it was okay, but I wouldn't have gone back and watched it probably if there was something else to do, anything else to do really. But last night I just happened to kind of switch into IndyCar's one, and I wouldn't say I was hooked, but it surprised me in a really positive way because they took it seriously. They treated it like a proper race. They had the 3 broadcasters, so it's Townsend, Bell, Lee Diffie, and Paul Tracy, treating it like a proper IndyCar race. You had an anthem before, you had a prayer, just like a proper IndyCar race. It was 45 laps. I think they had, I want to say 16 or the 17 IndyCar races involved, like with proper liveries. They had the TV graphics. They would have had a couple more involved, but Robert Wickens, they couldn't get all the equipment he needed for sim in time. James Hinchcliffe, funny enough, lost his connection, so didn't have a seat, which you could put that in a sort of real life situation. And then the guys that couldn't get involved because they just didn't get the equipment out in time, obviously because couriers have more pressing priorities. They filled it with Indy Lights drivers and I think Jimmy Johnson. So, you had proper names. This was a proper race taken seriously with strategy. I think if it's done like that and you get everyone involved and you do it properly, it can work. What I dislike is the half-hearted one where if you're going to treat it as a bit of a laugh and a bit of a joke, treat it like that. But I think the problem I had with the ones last weekend was they didn't know what they were trying to be, in that you had a couple of these guys taking it really seriously. And then you had Johnny Herbert. And it's like, as soon as you saw Johnny Herbert was involved, you knew. And I got a message from someone who said, Herbert's just texted me, watch this. And it's like, as soon as you know that he's involved, it's going to be chaos. So I think if you're going to do esports in some sort of virtual Grand Prix, you either say, look, we're going to do this as a bit of a laugh, bit of a thing for people to watch, or we're actually going to do it seriously. And I did like what IndyCar did. They even had commercials.
Oh, can't like commercials. Come on.
So they did it properly.
It's true, yeah.
want to see now is a crossover though. Like if we can get one where you've got some of the IndyCar drivers, some of the NASCAR drivers, some of the F1 drivers, if you can give them
like
the
a
right
motorsports all-stars. That'd be
yeah,
epic.
and you just need to put them all together on, ideally the best platform that they think for realistic racing. Give them a nondescript car. Get one car manufacturer that says, right, we're going to back this. Maybe one that's not in any of those categories and just says, right, we'll sponsor this and put some money in. And you get everyone involved, and that money hopefully goes to anything to do with this virus situation and trying to raise some money. But then you can have a grid of 20. And again, it's not going to be I don't think we're likely to get Lewis involved or Seb involved, someone like that. But you will get some. Lando will obviously do it. Max, if it's on the right platform, you can get 5 good names from F1. You can clearly get 5 of the top names from IndyCar involved. NASCAR did the same last weekend. That went well. So there is that scope to actually really combine it and make something really good. But as Phil says, if you're going to have all these different ones, they need to kind of work out how they want to position themselves.
Well, let us know what you think in the comments below about it. It's definitely an interesting debate on what we should do. But it's just not something we ever expected to happen. So it's all a bit like, what do we do? Everything's up in the air with it. But yeah, let us know in the comments below about that. Tweet us as well at F1 Chronicle for that. I want to thank you guys for both coming on the podcast today, and to Kunal as well, who dropped out just before. Really appreciate you having on. We are available on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music. We've also got a Reddit as well, F1 Podcast looking for feedback. If you don't like the sound of the baby in the background, don't worry, we can put them upstairs next week. Or whenever the next one is. It won't be next week. We're also available on Omni Studio, and we've got a Patreon as well if you want to donate to better lights and better soundproofing equipment for me.
Good luck getting that to you right now.
I know, yeah. Oh, thank you both for coming on.
Cheers, thank you very much, George.
No worries. Thanks for the invite. Good to chat.
No, always welcome. Good to see you this time as well.
Yeah.
It's always a bonus. And yeah, we don't know when we'll be back next. Hopefully we've got some feature episodes coming up at some point. Well, there's no actual F1. But yeah, we'll let you know on the official channels when we do. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Stay indoors. You can do your bit to help prevent the spread of coronavirus. Just listen to podcasts. Watch old F1 races, uploading those on YouTube too. Got plenty of options there. All right, stay safe. Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.